Hi there, welcome to Floating in Books. Today I'm going to be chatting to you about my favorite movie and TV series of the year. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is going to be a quick overview of all of the movies and TV series that I watched, but I'm going to be focusing on my favorites because I wrote it all down. Probably can't read it from there, but I started a bit of a bullet journal this year just to see what I would do with it. And I've actually found that I use the reading journal part of my bullet journal the most. So for 2025, I'm just going to be making a reading journal for myself. But it was handy to have some pages where I could actually write down everything that I watched, because not all of the streaming apps allow you to go back afterwards to see what you've actually watched. So I decided to just keep a list of all the things that I was watching, and I'm going throughout the year of all of the things that I thought were the best things I watched. These aren't necessarily things that came out this year. I'm much more of a streamer than a movie theater goer, you could say, but some of these were definitely things that were released this year. We started the year off strong with 3 different things that I watched that I thought were excellent, and some of these things I haven't heard anybody talking about. Like, some of these were very hyped up and I fell for the hype very much, but there's quite a few bits here that I had never heard anybody talking about. So the first one on the list is definitely that was the Bad Times at the El Royale. This is a bit of a ridiculous movie. I think it stars John Hamm and Dakota Johnson, and like a whole host of other characters. And it's a bit of like this Hotel California, like, you know, you can check in but you can never leave kind of vibe, where they all end up at this hotel in the middle of nowhere, and part of the hotel is in one state in the US, and the other side of the hotel is actually located in another state. And therefore, because it like sort of straps these legal boundaries, it is a place for criminals to meet. And very quickly on, you find out that everybody who kind of stays there has a nefarious sort of motive to be there. Like, they're not good people. And it just turns into this really, really absurd movie where, you know, people kidnap each other out of nowhere, and their motivations aren't always explained as well, but it had a killer of a soundtrack, which I'm always a bit of a sucker for. And I don't know why, it's just a movie that really kept me watching and really kept me going. And especially some of the, like, there's a lot of like shootouts and stuff. And it very much reminded me of From Dusk Till Dawn, which I think, is it by Richard or Robert Rodriguez? It features Quentin Tarantino and George Clooney, and it's from the 90s, and it's this vampire movie where they are told to meet at this bar because it's always very quiet. And then as they meet at that bar, they find out why it's always so quiet. And there's also this like massive killing spree going on, which you see happening a lot at the end of Quentin Tarantino movies. So it very much reminded me of that, but it's not a Quentin Tarantino movie as far as I know. But it definitely had that vibe. And I love me dark, grungy people who do bad things for absolutely no reason other than that they can do them. Like, I loved movies like that. So Bad Times at the El Royale was a killer for me. And it was a very unexpected favorite because I had not heard anybody talking about that. My second favorite on the list is a TV series I watched. I believe it's on Disney Plus, and it's The Murder at the End of the World. And now I forget the name of the actress. I'm so unprepared for this, but I never know names. I always recognize faces, but I never know names of actors. And she's like in a bunch of like famous things at the minute. Like, she's really up and coming. And it's essentially about this place, I think it's in Iceland, where this like tech giant has built a fortress where, you know, people can retreat to if things end up going badly in terms of like climate change, and it has just been built, it's just finished, and this tech giant mogul person invites 8 people to this fortress to check it out and to sort of discuss climate change and like the problems of the world and try to solve them. Sort of like a mini summit, but it's always on his dime, and he handpicks the people who are there. And our main character is a ethical hacker who ends up in this fortress. And very quickly on, already on the first night, things aren't going well. There's a dead body, nobody knows, but they also know there's nobody else there but them. So it's this locked room mystery of what's going on. And this was such a good TV series, and I haven't heard anybody talking about it. It's very mysterious because you're trying to figure out what's going on. Why are people dropping dead? But at the same time, it is a critical critique as well of climate change and what's going on, and also the rise of like people like an Elon Musk and how much power they have, as well as a critique of our use of technology and AI. So it had all these layers to it, which I really enjoyed, and the acting was phenomenal. And it had some really interesting things. The resolution at the end was a bit, I don't know. I didn't like the ending of it, but the entire journey towards it was excellent. The episodes are pretty long. I think it's like an hour each. And I really enjoyed it. It was a really unexpected good one where, yes, I got my murder mystery, but it was doing a little bit more than that. Third favorite on the list is a TV series I watched. It's actually a documentary series called The Program. And I think this was out for a while already. It was something my mom recommended I watched. If you don't like dark tales that happened for real, then maybe don't watch it, because this gets pretty intense. It's essentially about a school where kids are sent who don't behave the way that people around them want them to behave. Often they are sent there by their own parents. And this school is marketed to these parents as being this like revolutionary place where these kids are going to be trained and they're going to be disciplined and they're going to come out better people, essentially. I think it's the kind of school that Paris Hilton was sent to as well. Like that sort of vibe I'm getting from the stories that she shared about when she was like all of a sudden like put in this program as well. And it ends up just being torture for these kids. So the school that they're at, like the level of education they're getting isn't great. You have to earn points and you start at the bottom, which instills this hierarchy between the students of the people who've been there longer and who have the points, who then start bullying the kids who came in last just so they can get more points, because if you're part of the discipline team, that's what you're rewarded for. It was really, really strange, and they weren't actually learning anything other than how to hate people, really. And there's a bunch of kids who, like, they're now adults, and they came together who were at this school. It's since closed down, and they visit the site of this closed down school, and they also share their stories, and they actually look for records of the things that were happening to them so they can actually put a stop to this. But apparently this is like this isn't the only place in the US that operated or still operates this way. Apparently there are still places that do this to people, which mind-boggling. And then I watched a movie that's been out for years, but that I don't think I ever caught it anywhere. It was again on Disney Plus, and it's Hidden Figures. So if you don't know what Hidden Figures is about, it's about pretty much the first Black woman who works for NASA to figure out like the launch of like some sort of shuttle or like going into space before there were computers. So it's about women who are good at math. It's about minorities. And it's just a really, really well told story. Love the acting in this one as well. And I think it's just a really important story to know more about, because this is all based on true characters and things may have actually happened. Of course, it's fictionalized, so it's Hollywood. It's never going to be exactly the same as the lived experiences of these people, of course. But I just thought it was one of those things that was still on my to-watch list after all these years. After I first heard of this movie ever coming out, I knew I wanted to watch it. I had just never been able to catch it anywhere on streaming. And then it popped up on Disney Plus, and I was like, I want to watch that. So I finally did. I think this is also from like fairly early on in the year. I actually watched 2 movies back to back that were really popular at the end of 2023. I watched Poor Things and I watched All of Our Strangers. they are completely different movies, so let me separate them. So Poor Things is the Emma Stone movie where, is it, what's his face? Anyways, there's a scientist who figures out how to like Frankenstein someone back to life by inserting a brain of a baby into a grown woman's body. And then Bella, the character that Emma Stone plays, grows up even though she looks like an adult, and she wants to have all these experiences. It's apparently based on a book, and it has all these elaborate sets because there is this like almost like a magical element to it where she goes to different places. It feels very steampunky, this world, so I thought the sets were really amazing. I thought Emma Stone did some amazing acting, and it's a very important story as well, because it's very much about like bodily autonomy and about like women having a say about what happens to them. I definitely got undertones of that, so it's an important story as well, and I really enjoyed it. It is more of like an art housey feel kind of movie though, so if you just like mainstream blockbusters, this is probably not going to be up your street. But for me, I sometimes like these like weird, quirky things that just like to do something different. It kind of changes things up, you could say, and Poor Things definitely changes things up, and I really like that one. And secondly, I was talking about All of Us Strangers. This is a movie about a man who pretty much loses everything and doesn't know, he just no longer knows how to live his life. And then he gets a relationship with another person who he really connects with. And there are a lot of things that are going on there. I don't want to give away the premise of the movie. Maybe you already know, but I don't want to give you any spoilers. But it's Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott. So you have plenty of eye candy if you're into that. But it's also a very well acted, beautiful story that's about loneliness and emotions and how we deal with emotions, and it's beautifully portrayed in the movie. This is a little bit darker and sadder, so if you're not in the mood for that, then maybe this is not something you want to watch. I was bawling at the end of this movie. Like, it moved me to tears, for sure. That doesn't always mean much in my case, because I move to tears very easily when I watch movies and TV series. I cry about nearly everything, so when I'm watching something. So this was definitely something that triggered that as well, but it was very well done. I think, yep. I also really enjoyed the TV series Eric, which, was it on Netflix? It's Benedict Cumberbatch is in there, which is what made me watch it. And it's about a family whose kid seems to go missing. Dad is a workaholic who works as a puppeteer at this Sesame Street kind of TV show that everybody knows, and that's what he's famous for. And the dad is a bit of a prick, a bit of an asshole, you could say. He is not a kind person. He pretty much forgets everybody around him. Everything is about him. And the kid is just fed up with his dad and what's going on there. And then the show is at the same time, like, trying to create, like, a new character to be in the show. And as the dad is trying to find his son, this character comes to life in his mind and is following him everywhere. I didn't like the ending, but the story as it was being told, I thought was really interesting. We get the perspective from the son and why he ran away and why he goes into hiding, actually, more so. He didn't really get kidnapped or anything like that. He just didn't want to do this anymore. And everybody who gets blamed by the police and who's investigated. So there is, again, a lot of layers about police corruption and those kind of things are going on there as well. So I thought it was a very well told story, and there's a lot more going into it again than just the base level of the story, which I always enjoy. But in the end, I felt like it was perhaps a little bit too long, and I think there could have been fewer episodes, and the same point could have been put across, you could say. And then I had a lot of fun watching the second season of Kleo, and Kleo is a German TV series. The first season came out a couple of years ago on Netflix, and I really enjoyed that. And we get a second season, which is a continuation of the adventures of Kleo. So if you've never watched this, Kleo is a woman in the first series who works as a secret agent for the Stasi, which is like the Secret Service police on like in East Berlin in like the 80s. Something goes wrong doing her job. She is imprisoned by her superiors, tucked away into prison, and then the Cold War ends, the Berlin Wall drops, and she's freed. But then she goes searching for the people who did this to her. That's pretty much the premise of the first season. In the second season, we just get a little bit more about it because not everything that happens in the first season is resolved. There's a lot more going into it. So this has to do with like Russia and the KGB, but at the same time, it's like really funny and tongue-in-cheek. And Kleo is this really sort of deadpan kind of character who's like, yeah, so I killed him. He was in my way. You know, that sort of humor is in there. And in the second season, we get a lot more Sven, who I think that's what his name is. He's a journalist or police officer in the first series who sort of starts noticing that something is going on and he becomes involved in the plot. And in the second season, it becomes this will they, won't they kind of situationship where is he still with his wife? Is he not? Because they're separated and then there's something going on with his best friend. It's like, it's very over the top, especially the acting, but it is also incredibly fun and it just gives such a good snapshot of what the like late 80s and the early 90s were like in East Berlin. That's sort of the vibe you're getting from it. The music is on point, the costumes are on point, and it is an incredibly fun watch. But at the same time, it's giving you a glimpse of history of what life was like at the time, which is actually quite accurate as well. So it's not just the sort of imagery that's done very well, but it also ties in with like all of the unraveling that had to happen after Germany became like one country again. So it's like it's essentially tapping into German history. I don't know that much about German history, but I've been to Berlin and they actually have a museum there which actually shows you the difference between like things that were sold in West Berlin and things that were sold in East Berlin, which was really, really fun. So that was very eye-opening of how different things were, and that makes you understand of how people must have like how they had to like just get to know their own country again in a way, because it was those must have been weird times. I cannot imagine how that was. Then I think we're almost there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 7 more things to talk about. So these are more like second half of the year. I've got Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I did not read this book because I was like, I don't need a prequel about President Snow. I didn't need it. I watched all the Hunger Games movies. I read those books, but I didn't really need it, I felt. So I was like, why is this even happening? But then the movie was on streaming and I was like not knowing what to watch, and I was like, I hope it's well done. And I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. Not necessarily the character of President Snow. I mean, he was very unkind throughout the whole thing. But I really liked the main character of the girl who was like playing the person that he was like trying to like be a sponsor for in the Hunger Games. And I really liked her sort of vibe. I thought it was really well done. It was a lot more well done than I had expected. The story was more interesting, but I definitely see it as something that's separate from Hunger Games. I mean, the fact that there was like a Hunger Games kind of situation going on in the movie is like the only thing that really ties it together for me. So if you think of it as like a standalone story, it works a lot better in my brain. And then I have to talk about Chaos. I really, really enjoyed it. It's on Netflix. It features a whole host of famous actors, Jeff Goldblum being one of the prominent ones here, but there's plenty of others who you'll recognize. And this is essentially Greek mythology, but told as if it is happening now, so as if there are Greek gods now. So if you're familiar with Greek mythology and you enjoy Greek mythology retellings, this may be nice. It kind of fuses several stories together. It has great representation. It's pretty true to the source material as well. Like, a lot of people don't realize that gods in Greek mythology are just incredibly narcissistic, bad people, you could say, and they're just trying to make things work for them, and they don't really care about anything else. And I thought that that was something the series really leaned into. Unfortunately, it's not going to get a second season, which I feel very saddened by. Very saddened by the fact that it's not going to get a second season, but it was very enjoyable. I enjoy a good Greek mythology retelling, I definitely do. And I really enjoyed the guy who played Dionysus. He's like the main character we see a lot. We follow him around a lot. And I really enjoyed his acting. I thought he did really well. I also really liked some of the scenes in the underworld that we're getting with like trying to figure out what's going on there. Thought that was really well done, and they definitely added a new layer to these stories that have been around for millennia, so props to that. I really enjoyed it. And then I started watching Killing Eve. I had, again, heard of this. I had heard it was really good. This was brilliant. This was such a good fun romp of like Secret Service, mystery going on, why is there an assassin killing all these people? But then the person trying to find the assassin and the assassin become infatuated with each other. And that's sort of what the rest of the series is about, which I thought was less interesting. The first season is definitely the one that I liked best. Each season of this TV series is written by a different female writer. So the first one is Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Is that her name? I always forget. But the woman who's behind Fleabag. And then the second season, I believe, was written by the director of Saltburn, and there's like different like people who wrote it, which is great. But because they bring a different writer on board, I definitely felt there were continuity issues with some of the main storylines that were going on. However, I really, really enjoyed a lot of the acting in this. It was very well done. It was just really, really fun to watch this one. It was a bit hilarious at times. Some great actors in there, and I thought it was just a little bit too long, and it kept going for too long. I think if they had not done the fourth season, the overall series would be better. But if you watch just anything from this, just watch the first season, and you may actually be very satisfied with what you're watching. And you know, I love my superhero movies, and especially if they're dark and grungy, like The City of Gotham, I like it even more. So I really enjoyed the Penguin TV series that we got on HBO. It's a spin-off from the Batman movie that we got a couple of years ago with Robert Pattinson. That's how I knew about it. I knew Colin Farrell was the Penguin in that movie, and there's a character who's killed in the movie, and sort of from that moment on, we get sort of the rise of the Penguin in the Gotham underworld, you could say. So it sort of picks up where the movie leaves off. And this was one where I really struggled getting into it. The first episode, like this was released episode for episode for episode for a few weeks. And I watched the first episode thinking, okay, I can watch it every week. And then I was like, oh, I just couldn't get into it. But then I waited until everything else was on streaming. And I watched it back to back in like 2 sittings. And it was a lot better that way. So pretty much it's a background story. I don't always love those because we've gotten so many, especially in like the Marvel universe, like for a while there, every single superhero story we got was just the story of how they became the villain or the superhero, which it gets old, but this was really well done. There was a lot going on in this series with how he starts making it, and like at first nobody really takes him seriously, but as he starts to grow and as he starts to play the game the most, it becomes super intriguing. And he has a bit of a rivalry with the daughter of, was it the daughter of the guy who got killed? I forget, but at least her dad is dead, and she like works her way up into this underworld as well, and then they get a bit of a rivalry. When that started to happen, when all the characters were introduced in like the first 2 or 3 episodes, that's when it started rolling. So it took a while for this story to be properly set up so that everything, all the pieces started to move around. So that's why it's a bit slow. It's definitely more slow paced, but I thought it worked. In the end, I really liked it. And I would like to see more of the Penguin for sure now that I've watched this. I believe it's being renewed, if I'm not mistaken, but it could take years until that's out. But I thought it was very well done. Then another documentary that I watched, this came out just a few weeks ago. It's Buy Now, it's on Netflix. It's essentially about overconsumption, and it also isn't just about what consumers do to overconsume. No, this one actually focuses on what companies do to get consumers to overconsume. So it talks to people about who've worked for Amazon. It talks to people who've worked for Apple. Like all these like people who were behind the scenes, who were in charge of figuring out what color the button has to be so people buy more. That's pretty much what you're getting a perspective on. So it's very much from people who've worked behind the scenes, who also say like I'm partly to blame for what the company was doing, but then when I started to speak up, or I started to realize what was going on and that we weren't doing the right thing, and I tried to put a stop to it, I was either laid off or I decided to quit myself. So it's very much that sort of thing. Sometimes I felt this documentary focused too much on the personal stories of these individuals and how they got into the position where they are today. If they had done less of that, they could have added more content into the documentary. However, I think it's really important content that this documentary has to offer. And it definitely goes into like marketing tactics. And since I do work at a marketing degree, I kind of also watched it not only for my own enjoyment, but it's also the kind of thing I would like to like watch to stay up to date with like what's going on in the field that I'm teaching. So it's definitely that as well. So I thought it was a very interesting watch. If you're curious to know how you're being manipulated, this may be one to watch. And then I'm also currently still in the midst, I think I've watched 4 or 5 episodes now, of Rivals. So this is sort of like a sneaky one towards the end of the year. I'll definitely finish it sometime soon this week. But it's a British television series about the 80s, like television in the 80s in England, when commercial TV is first being introduced in the UK, and like the different players who are in it. David Tennant is in here, so I had to watch it because he's in it. But again, it's also incredibly well made. It's incredible how many narcissistic people can be put in a room together. That's definitely what this is all about. It's a reason why it's called Rivals, and it's about like people who are also like a little bit more social mobile. So all of a sudden they live in a neighborhood with all these rich folks, because they're like, okay, we can now afford to live here, and they don't know what the social etiquette is at all with all these rich people around them. But then there's also like the producer, the moguls behind the scenes who are like yelling at everyone to get their act together, etc., etc. And at the same time, they all just hate each other. That's essentially what this is. It's a lot of bickering, a lot of fighting, and it's a lot of people having affairs. Let's put it that way. And the final thing I wanted to share with you here today is the Red Riding trilogy. So this came up very randomly as a suggestion on my Netflix the other night, and I quickly found out that it wasn't just one thing. It was actually 3 movie-length sort of stories that are based on books, apparently. That's what I looked up. And this is older. It's like from 2009. That's when it aired on TV. This again has a bunch of famous people in. Also people who are now really famous or more famous than they were at the time. So it's this really interesting like time capsule of like all these British actors who you see everywhere at the minute. It has, what's his face? What's his face? The guy who played Spider-Man. Andrew is his first name. Anyway, the Andrew who played Spider-Man, he's in it. He's the main character in the first movie in this trilogy. There's the actress who played Mary in Downton Abbey, who has a very small role in the first and last part. There's a guy who plays Klaus in the Umbrella Academy. He's in it. There's so many people who are in it. There's like, oh yeah, I've watched this and this and that's with you that you've done since then. This is again really dark. It's not for the faint of heart. It has like full-blown violence and stuff in it. It's essentially about police corruption and brutality, you could say. That's sort of at the core of every single episode. But each movie features on a different story of either a child or a woman who's disappeared. And like someone who comes in from the outside, be it a journalist, be it another police officer, be it a lawyer, who get involved and find out that the police are actually not doing their jobs because they're being paid off. That's essentially what's going on. You find this out really, really quickly, that things are not the way they're supposed to be. So that's not a spoiler at all. But they were very interesting watches. Again, a little bit more slow paced at places. But it's, again, very much a study of like human beings and how far we're willing to go for certain things. That's definitely at the heart of it. And it was an interesting watch for sure. Not enjoyable per se, because as I said, there's a lot of like full-blown violence in this. Like you can actually see bones break in this thing. So if that's not your cup of tea, then please don't watch. But if you want to like dig deep into like the 70s and 80s in the north of England, and like it's based on true facts, but it is fictionalized. That may be good to know. So it is tapping into some of the disappearances and murders that took place at the time. But all the names are fictionalized. But the author who wrote the books did take like things from the actual police investigation and stuff. So yes, those were all of the best things I watched in 2024. Watching something is just something I do almost every night when I'm editing videos. I like plop something on in the background and just edit a video while watching something. You know how I can tell that something is good? If I start watching my TV more than focusing on the editing. So sometimes editing videos can take me 3 hours just because I'm not focusing on the editing. So yeah, those are all of the things that I wanted to recommend to you, of things that if you haven't seen it yet, maybe there's something here that you do enjoy. I'm going to be finishing off the year on this channel with a couple of videos where I tell you about things like this, with my favorite TV series and movies that I watched. Next week, I'm going to tell you more about all the travels I did this year and tell you about my travel plans for 2025. And then I think a week later, I'm going to do a final wrap up for the year so I can kick off the new year, because apparently January 1st is a Wednesday, with a video with all of my reading stats of the year and like my favorite books of the year. So if you want to stay tuned for all of that goodness, then I hope you'd like to stay tuned. Come back for more next week when I will share with you all about my travels of 2024. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.